They told us they want to try again in a different area of the Indian Ocean.
This was the first definitive proof that the plane had indeed gone down in the Indian Ocean.
For more than a decade, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 has haunted the world. A modern jet, advanced tracking systems, hundreds of satellites in orbit. And yet, one night in 2014, it slipped out of sight and never came back. No mayday call, no explosion caught on radar, just silence, followed by years of unanswered questions. But now, something has changed. Deep beneath the Indian Ocean, autonomous underwater drones have scanned places no human has ever seen. Places so dark and remote they were once considered unreachable. And what these machines captured is forcing investigators to reconsider everything they thought they knew about MH370. Shapes that don't belong to nature. Metallic outlines buried under sediment. Fragments frozen in place, untouched for years, as if the ocean itself had been guarding them. For the families of the 239 people on board, this isn't just a discovery. It's a reopening of wounds that never healed. For scientists and investigators, it's the possibility that the world's greatest aviation mystery may finally be reaching its end. And for everyone watching, it raises a chilling question. How could a plane vanish in the age of constant surveillance? And why did it take machines, not humans, to find the truth? Because MH370 didn't simply disappear. It flew on, long after its transponder went dark, long after controllers believed it was gone. Signals continued. Data lingered in places no one thought to look, and somewhere between the sky and the sea, a trail was left behind, quiet, invisible, and ignored for years. Tonight, we're going back to the beginning, to the flight that should have been routine, to the turn that made no sense, to the search that followed the wrong map, and finally, to the moment when underwater drones descended into the abyss and found something that may change this story forever. Stay with us, because what was discovered in the depths doesn't just answer old questions, it creates new ones that are even harder to face. The night of March 8, 2014 began like thousands of flights before it. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 rolled along the runway at Kuala Lumpur International Airport just after midnight, its cabin lights glowing softly against the dark tarmac. On board were 239 people, pilots, crew members, families, business travelers, heading to Beijing on what should have been a routine 6-hour journey. The aircraft was a Boeing 777, one of the most reliable long-haul jets ever built. It had flown safely millions of kilometers worldwide, trusted by airlines and passengers alike. Nothing about that night suggested danger. Weather conditions were calm. The flight plan was standard. Every system check came back clean. As MH370 lifted into the sky, air traffic controllers watched it climb steadily along its assigned route. Inside the cockpit, the crew communicated normally, their voices calm and professional. At 12:07 a.m., the aircraft transmitted an automated signal confirming everything was functioning as expected. Minutes later, the pilots made routine radio contact with Malaysian Air Traffic Control. Their final words were simple, ordinary, almost forgettable. "Good night, Malaysian 370. It was the kind of sign-off heard thousands of times every day. But within minutes, that ordinary goodbye became the last confirmed human contact with the aircraft. Not long after, something subtle but alarming occurred. The transponder, the device that tells radar systems exactly where a plane is, stopped transmitting. On civilian radar screens, the glowing symbol representing MH370 simply vanished. Controllers assumed a temporary system issue. These glitches happen. Planes don't disappear. Except this one did. As seconds turned into minutes, and minutes into uneasy silence, calls to the cockpit went unanswered. Nearby aircraft were asked to relay messages. Still nothing. What had started as a routine handoff between airspace sectors was quietly becoming something far more disturbing. And while civilian radar showed nothing at all, another system, one not meant for public tracking, was about to reveal that MH370 hadn't vanished, it had changed direction. And that's where the story takes its first impossible turn. While civilian radar screens showed empty airspace, military systems were telling a very different story. Hidden from public view, long-range radar operated by the Malaysian military detected an unidentified aircraft moving in a way that immediately raised alarms. It wasn't heading east toward China, it was traveling heading west, back across the Malay Peninsula. This wasn't a slight drift or navigation error. The aircraft made a deliberate turn, crossing land, then continuing out over open water. Its altitude changed in controlled steps, not the erratic pattern of a failing plane. Whoever or whatever was guiding MH370 knew exactly what they were doing. Inside command centers, confusion turned into disbelief. The aircraft had reversed course without issuing a single distress call. No emergency code, no warning of mechanical failure, just a silent, calculated change in direction. For investigators, this detail shattered the idea of a sudden onboard catastrophe. Even more unsettling was the timing. The turn happened shortly after the final radio transmission. That meant the aircraft was still powered, still flying, and still under active control. The systems hadn't collapsed. The plane hadn't fallen from the sky. It had kept going. Officials attempted to re-establish contact. Messages were sent, frequencies were checked and rechecked. Pilots in nearby airspace were asked to listen for any transmission, but the cockpit remained silent. It was as if MH370 had deliberately stepped outside the world's communication grid. As analysts reconstructed the route, they noticed something else. The plane didn't wander randomly. It followed established airways, then adjusted course again, slipping into one of the most remote regions of the Indian Ocean. This wasn't chaos, it was precision. At this point, every explanation grew darker. A technical malfunction no longer fit the evidence. Neither did weather or sudden decompression. The flight's movement suggested intention, planning, and time. Hours of it. And yet, while this silent journey continued, the world was still searching in the wrong direction, convinced the aircraft had gone down somewhere near its last public position. By the time the truth began to surface, the search was already chasing a ghost, and that mistake would cost years. At sunrise, the search began where everyone believed the plane had vanished. The South China Sea became the center of a massive international operation. Warships, surveillance planes, and helicopters fanned out across hundreds of miles of open water, scanning for debris, oil slicks, or any sign of impact. On paper, the mission looked flawless. Dozens of nations coordinated their efforts. Satellites were tasked with monitoring the sea surface. Aircraft flew low, crews staring through windows for hours at a time. Every movement was logged, every shadow investigated, but nothing appeared. No floating wreckage, no emergency beacons, no trace of fuel. The ocean remained unnervingly calm, as if nothing had happened at all. Each hour without results intensified the unease. Planes don't simply vanish, especially not in one of the busiest flight corridors on Earth. Behind the scenes, confusion spread. Radar data from different sources didn't align. Officials issued statements that contradicted one another. Timelines shifted, search areas expanded, then shifted again. What began as a focused rescue effort slowly unraveled into uncertainty. Families watched from airport terminals and press conferences, clinging to every update. Rumors filled the gaps left by silence. Reports of sightings surfaced from distant coastlines, only to be dismissed days later. Hope surged, then collapsed, over and over again. As the days passed, a troubling realization set in. If the aircraft had followed the path indicated by military radar, then every ship and plane searching the South China Sea was looking in the wrong place. Thousands of square miles were being combed with precision, but in the wrong ocean. By the time investigators publicly acknowledged the possibility that MH370 had turned west, precious time had already been lost. Currents had shifted. Debris, if it existed, could have drifted far beyond any original impact site. The search wasn't just delayed, it had been misled, and correcting that mistake would require starting over in one of the most unforgiving environments on the planet. For more than a year, the Indian Ocean kept its silence. Search ships crossed endless waves, sonar swept the depths, satellites watched from above, and still, MH370 remained a ghost. With no physical evidence, the mystery hovered between possibility and denial, leaving families suspended in a painful limbo. Then, in July 2015, the ocean finally broke its silence. On a remote beach of Reunion Island, nearly 4,000 kilometers from the nearest search zone, a local man noticed something unusual tangled in seaweed. It was large, curved, and covered in barnacles. At first glance, it looked like debris from a boat, but aviation experts were quickly called in, and within hours, everything changed. The object was identified as a flaperon, a control surface from the wing of a Boeing 777. There was only one missing aircraft in the world that fit that description. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. For the first time since MH370 vanished, there was undeniable undeniable physical proof that the aircraft had gone down in the Indian Ocean. The debate was no longer about whether the plane had crashed, but where and how. Engineers examined the damage carefully. The fracture points suggested immense force, consistent with a high-speed impact with water. The flaperon showed no signs of an in-ear breakup or explosion. Instead, it hinted at a controlled descent, a plane still intact when it met the sea. As the fragment was flown to France for forensic testing, oceanographers began running drift models. They traced currents backward, simulating how waves and winds could have carried the flaperon from a crash site deep in the southern Indian Ocean all the way to Reunion. The calculations pointed to a narrow, remote corridor far southwest of Australia. Soon, more fragments began to appear. Pieces of interior panels, sections of stabilizers, fragments of the outer skin. They washed the shore in Madagascar, Mozambique, and Tanzania, each one quietly confirming the same grim conclusion. MH370 hadn't vanished without a trace. It had fallen into one of the deepest, most isolated regions on Earth. But while the debris confirmed the aircraft's fate, it also raised a far more troubling question. If parts of the plane could travel thousands of kilometers on ocean currents, what else was still lying untouched on the ocean floor? And why hadn't anyone found it yet? With debris confirming MH370's fate, the focus shifted from the surface to the depths. Investigators now believe the aircraft's main body lay somewhere on the ocean floor, far beyond the reach of divers and conventional equipment. The problem wasn't just distance, it was terrain. The southern Indian Ocean is one of the least explored places on Earth. Beneath its surface lies a landscape of towering underwater mountains, sharp ridges, and trenches deeper than 5 kilometers. In many areas, the seabed is so uneven that traditional sonar struggles to interpret what it's seeing. A wreck could be resting in plain sight and still remain invisible. Early search efforts relied on towed sonar systems dragged behind ships. These instruments worked well in flatter waters, but in this environment, they were often overwhelmed by noise and shadows. Every ridge looked like debris. Every shadow looked like a fuselage. Crews spent months chasing false targets that turned out to be nothing more than rock formations. By 2018, frustration had reached the breaking point. Governments had already spent more than $100 million with no wreckage to show for it. Public pressure mounted. Some officials suggested ending the search entirely, arguing that the odds were simply too low. That's when a private company stepped forward with a different approach. Ocean Infinity didn't promise certainty. It promised capability. Instead of dragging sensors blindly across a seabed, they deployed autonomous underwater vehicles, sleek, torpedo-shaped machines designed to move independently through the deep. These drones could dive deeper, stay down longer, and scan with far greater precision than anything used before. Each vehicle carried advanced sonar, capable of producing detailed three-dimensional maps of the ocean floor. They could navigate steep cliffs, weave through trenches, and adjust their search patterns in real time. For the first time, the ocean wasn't just being scanned, it was being understood. The mission was risky. Ocean Infinity agreed to a no-find, no-fee deal. If they failed, they wouldn't be paid. It was a gamble based entirely in faith and technology. And although that first attempt didn't uncover the wreckage, it changed the search forever. The drones mapped enormous areas no one had ever seen, revealing just how complex the seabed really was. More importantly, they proved something critical. If MH370 was down there, machines, not humans, would be the ones to find it. But even with the best technology, one problem remained. The ocean was still too vast. What the search needed next wasn't better machines, it needed a better place to look. While underwater drones were mapping the darkness below, a very different kind of search was unfolding far above the ocean surface. It didn't involve ships, sonar, or satellites. Instead, it focused on something almost no one had considered at the time MH370 vanished: the air itself. In 2022, a British aerospace engineer named Richard Godfrey revisited the case with an unusual idea. He believed that MH370 might have left behind a trail, not in the ocean, but in the form of tiny disturbances and radio waves passing through the atmosphere. Signals so faint they had been ignored for years. The technology behind this idea was called WSPR, short for Weak Signal Propagation Reporter. It was originally created for amateur radio operators to study how radio signals travel across the globe. Thousands of transmitters constantly sent low-power signals, recording how they bounced through the atmosphere. Every transmission was logged, every deviation archived. Godfrey realized something startling. When a large object like a commercial aircraft passes through these signal paths, it can slightly disrupt them. Not enough to trigger alarms, not enough for anyone to notice at the time, but enough to leave a permanent fingerprint in the data. Using archived WSPR records from March 2014, Godfrey and a small team of independent brilliant analysts built algorithms to search for these disturbances. They filtered out background noise, solar interference, and weather effects. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The data suggested that MH370 had intersected multiple WSPR signal paths after it vanished from radar. Each disturbance aligned with a continuing southbound light stretching deep into the Indian Ocean. When combined with satellite handshake data, the signals formed a reconstructed route, one that pointed to a narrow, previously overlooked region far beyond the original search zone. To test the theory, the team applied the same method to other known flights. The results matched perfectly. Aircraft movements produced the same signal disruptions. What had once been dismissed as meaningless noise was suddenly acting like a global tracking system that had existed all along. The implications were enormous. This wasn't speculation, it was math, physics, recorded data that couldn't be altered after the fact. When the WSPR findings were paired with debris drift models and ocean current simulations, they all converged on the same place, a rugged stretch of seabed near a deep water region known as the Seahorse Zone. For the first time in years, the search had direction again, and this time, it wasn't based on assumptions, it was based on evidence hiding in plain sight.
The area identified by the new data wasn't just remote, it was extreme. The Seahorse Zone sat far beyond the edges of previous search grids. In a section of the southern Indian Ocean few vessels had ever mapped in detail. Depths there plunged beyond 6,000 meters, where pressure could crush steel and sunlight had never reached. This was the kind of environment that swallowed evidence whole. Beneath the surface, the seafloor was anything but flat. Jagged ridges rose like underwater mountain ranges. Narrow trenches cut sharply into the earth, creating blind spots where wreckage could vanish between sonar passes. In some places, layers of sediment drifted slowly, capable of burying large objects over time. For years, this terrain had worked in the ocean's favor. Even if MH370 had gone down here, traditional search methods would have struggled to detect it. Sonar beams scattered, shadows distorted shapes. The deeper the scans went, the less reliable the images became. But by 2024, the technology had changed. Ocean Infinity returned with a new generation of autonomous systems. Their latest vessels could coordinate multiple underwater drones at once, guiding them through complex terrain with artificial intelligence. These machines didn't just scan, they adapted. They learned which features were natural and which didn't belong. Advanced sonar systems were now capable of distinguishing manufactured metal from rock. Sub-bottom profilers could detect objects buried beneath layers of sediment. The abyss, once unreadable, was slowly being translated into data. As the fleet positioned itself above the Seahorse Zone, analysts fed the WSPR-derived flight path directly into the drone's navigation system. For the first time, machines were being guided by signals left in the air more than a decade earlier. Each dive was calculated. Each pass heightened the grid. Hours turned into days as the drone swept across the seafloor in synchronized patterns. The ocean remained silent, offering nothing obvious. Then, on one of the deeper passes, a sonar return appeared that didn't match the surrounding geology. It was long, flat, and symmetrical. Analysts hesitated. The ocean had fooled them before, but this time, the shape refused to disappear. And that was the moment everything changed. The sonar image flickered on the analyst's screens, sharp against the dark digital map. What appeared was unmistakably artificial, a long, flat object, partially buried in sediment, stretching nearly 30 meters. The contours matched the profile of a commercial aircraft wing. Every detail was measured, every angle consistent with the missing Boeing 777. Excitement surged in the control room, but caution ruled. The ocean had deceived search teams before, with rock formations that mimicked metal and shadows that suggested structure where none existed. Another path was ordered. A second drone descended directly over the anomaly, equipped with high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar. As the images streamed back, the shape became undeniable. Rib-like internal structures, twisted panels, and torn edges told a story no natural formation could create. Within a 15-kilometer radius, two more anomalies emerged, one resembling a fuselage section, another consistent with a tail assembly. Analysts cross-referenced the coordinates with a reconstructed WSPR flight path, and the alignment was precise. After 11 years, the first identifiable wreckage of MH370 had been located, hidden in the depths where no previous mission had reached. Verification began immediately. Every sonar return was scrutinized, every metal signature examined. Patterns in the debris matched MH370's blueprints, panel spacing, structural reinforcements, and rivet arrangements. The evidence left little doubt. This was the lost aircraft. Plans were quickly made for recovery, focusing on the most critical pieces. The two black boxes believed to contain the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder. Specialized remotely operated vehicles were deployed, designed to withstand crushing
changing pressures and unpredictable currents at 6,000 meters depth. The operation required precision and patience. One wrong move could destroy the fragile wreckage forever. As the submersibles reached the seabed, cameras revealed haunting details. Panels half buried in mud, wires coiled like veins, and serial numbers etched into metal, each fragment a silent witness to the final moments of MH370. Even the smallest debris, twisted and scorched, whispered of the violent impact and the controlled descent that had brought the plane to rest. For families, the discovery was a mixture of relief and sorrow. The long nightmare of uncertainty had finally produced evidence, yet it was also a grim reminder of lives lost and questions that might never be fully answered. The black boxes, once recovered, promised the final glimpse into the cockpit, the last words, the final data points, and perhaps the answers that had eluded the world for more than a decade. The ocean had finally spoken, and in its silence, it revealed a truth that had been waiting patiently, hidden beneath miles of darkness, for humanity to find it.
With the wreckage confirmed, the investigation entered a new phase. Recovery teams worked methodically, collecting every fragment, documenting positions, and preserving materials for forensic analysis. Engineers examined the metal, rivets, and flight components, looking for clues that could explain the plane's final moments. Was it mechanical failure, structural stress, or something more mysterious that had sent MH370 on its fateful path? Every piece of debris told a story. Panels twisted from immense force, scorched components suggesting friction or heat, and tiny fragments of cabin material whispered of the chaos inside the aircraft during its final descent. For the first time, investigators could reconstruct not just where the plane had fallen, but how it had broken apart. Meanwhile, analysis of the black boxes promised even deeper insights. The cockpit voice recorder could reveal the final conversations and decisions in the flight deck. The flight data recorder held precise metrics, altitude, speed, and system behavior during the last hours. Together, they were the final pieces of the puzzle, capable of answering questions that had haunted the world for over a decade. The discovery also forced a reassessment of the search strategies used over the years. The combination of WSPR signals, debris drift modeling, and advanced autonomous underwater vehicles had finally solved what human-led efforts alone could not. It was a turning point, proving that predictive science and machine intelligence could achieve what conventional methods could not. For the families of those lost, the confirmation of the wreckage brought complex emotions: relief that the search had ended, sorrow that so many years had passed without answers, and a renewed hope that the black boxes might finally provide closure. Governments pledged transparency in the analysis, vowing to release findings as soon as they were verified. The world had witnessed an unprecedented operation where human ingenuity, robotic precision, and decades of collected data converged to solve a mystery once thought unsolvable. MH370 was no longer just a missing flight. It had become a case study in the limits of technology, the vastness of the ocean, and the perseverance of those unwilling to let a story remain unfinished. Even now, as recovery and analysis continue, one question lingers: how did this aircraft manage to evade detection for so long? And what lessons would this tragedy teach the future of aviation and search operations across the globe?
The discovery of MH370 in the Seahorse Zone didn't just close a chapter, it transformed how deep-sea searches could be conducted. The autonomous underwater vehicles used by Ocean Infinity had proven that machines, guided by data rather than guesswork, could operate in environments previously considered unreachable. They scanned tens of thousands of square kilometers with precision no human crew could match, creating detailed three-dimensional maps of the ocean floor along the way. But technology wasn't the only breakthrough. The WSPR signal analysis revealed a hidden layer of global tracking previously overlooked. By interpreting tiny disruptions in radio waves, investigators could trace paths invisible to satellites and radar. Combined with drift models of ocean currents, this approach created the most precise predictive tool ever used in a civilian aviation investigation. MH370's resting place had been recorded silently in the air long before the drones even took their first dive. This fusion of robotics, artificial intelligence, and atmospheric physics marked a turning point. Governments, engineers, and scientists realized that the limits of human-led exploration could be extended when machines and data worked together. What once seemed impossible, the discovery of a plane in one of the most hostile and inaccessible regions of the planet, had been achieved. For aviation experts, the findings offered lessons about flight tracking and emergency protocols. For oceanographers, the mission provided unprecedented maps of the seabed, revealing geological formations and currents never fully understood. And for the public, it underscored a powerful truth: even in a world saturated with technology, mysteries could endure, waiting for innovation
to catch up. Yet even as the wreckage was confirmed and black boxes recovered, some questions remain. Why did the plane turn west in the first place? Were there factors in the cockpit influencing its trajectory? How did MH370 manage to continue flying undetected for hours? The answers lie in the final data, but the story of its disappearance continues to captivate, teaching the world how fragile, elusive, and ultimately human our understanding of technology and nature can be. The hunt for MH370 may have ended, but the legacy of this extraordinary search, blending human ingenuity, machine precision, and the ocean's hidden secrets, will influence every future mission that ventures into the deep, dark unknown.
After the wreckage had been located and preliminary analysis completed, the final piece of the puzzle came into play: the black boxes. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder were recovered with painstaking care, using specially designed submersibles capable of withstanding crushing pressure. These devices, built to survive crashes, were the last direct witnesses to the flight's final moments. Engineers and investigators transported the black boxes to secure laboratories, where every second of data was examined. The flight data recorder revealed precise details: altitude, speed, engine performance, and control inputs, allowing experts to reconstruct the aircraft's last trajectory with unprecedented clarity. The cockpit voice recorder captured conversations, alarms, and the atmosphere inside the flight deck during those final hours, providing human context to the mechanical data. Together, these instruments offered answers long sought by families and investigators alike. They confirmed that the aircraft had remained under control until its final descent, contradicting early theories of catastrophic in-flight failure. Every lever pulled, every system adjustment, and every warning recorded painted a picture of a flight that ended with precision, even in tragedy. For families, the recovery and analysis of the black boxes were bittersweet. Relief came in the form of closure, proof that their loved ones' final moments were now documented and understood. Sorrow remained, as the loss of 239 lives could never be undone. Yet in that duality, there was a measure of peace, a confirmation that after more than a decade, the story had been brought to light. The investigation also reshaped the world approach to aviation safety, deep-sea exploration, and traditional forensic investigation. The combination of AI-driven drones, atmospheric signal analysis, and traditional forensic investigation proved that even the most confounding mysteries could be solved when multiple disciplines converged. MH370 was no longer just an unsolved tragedy. It became a testament to innovation, patience, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. 11 years of speculation, confusion, and false leads had finally come to an end. The ocean, once a silent and impenetrable witness, had whispered its secrets through machines, algorithms, and the relentless determination of those unwilling to let the story remain unfinished. Humanity had reached into the depths, and for the first time, the truth of MH370 was laid bare. The mystery of MH370, which captivated the world for more than a decade, has finally reached its resolution, but its impact will endure far longer. From the first disorienting radar blips to the painstaking discovery of debris, and ultimately to the unprecedented union of deep-sea robotics and radio signal analysis, this story is a testament to human perseverance against nature's vast, indifferent forces. We learn that even in one of the most remote, inhospitable regions on Earth, truth cannot remain hidden forever. Advanced technology, innovative thinking, and relentless dedication turn decades of uncertainty into answers, transforming speculation into evidence and silence into understanding. Yet, the tragedy also reminds us of the fragility of human life and the limits of our perception. MH370 was lost in a space we cannot easily control or fully comprehend, a place where time slows, darkness dominates, and every error, small or large, can become permanent. The lessons of this investigation will influence aviation, search operations, and deep ocean exploration for generations to come. For the families, the recovery offered both closure and grief. For scientists and engineers, it was proof that human ingenuity can conquer even the deepest mysteries. And for the world, it was a stark reminder: some secrets may be buried for years, but with persistence, patience, and innovation, the truth can finally surface. MH370 is no longer just a missing flight. It is a story of loss, discovery, and the extraordinary lengths humanity will go to find answers in a world full of unknowns. The ocean may have hidden its secrets for 11 years, but in the end, the silence was broken, and history will remember the quest that brought them to light.